Hello and welcome back to my channel. For those for the first time here, my name is Zach. I'm 21 years old Russian who left Russia because of the war against Ukraine. And today I want to tell you about my experience of growing up in a Putinist Russia. Why do I say that I was born and brought up in the Putinist Russia? Well, it is quite simple because Putin came to power at the year of 2000 and I was born at the year of 2001. And guess what? Putin is still a president. He is the only president except Medvedev, who was a puppet of Putin. I hope it is obvious for everyone. Putin was the only president I have seen throughout many years of my life. I mean, through my whole life. The policy that he applied and his government applied, it affected me and it affected my mentality, personality, everything, because it's all environment. It all affects you. Many of my subscribers ask me, like, Zach, why are you not brainwashed as those Russians with a Z letter on the forehead supporting the war? Why are you not like them? Why are you different from them? So here is a video which answers this quite frank question. So up to the age of 12, I was growing up with my grandma and with my mother alone with no father figure in my family. You know, pretty classical for Russian families. It is a quite big topic why there are so much of, as I say, unfatherness in Russia is going on. Anyway, so I was growing up with with my mom, with my grandma, and they always loved and appreciated Putin. I don't remember any single comment from them up to my age 12 when they would criticize even a word Putin would say. They always listened to him carefully, they always agreed, and they were absolutely happy with Putin. And I was also happy with Putin because, I was just up to 12 years old. You just follow what your parents say. You don't really have your personal opinion on politics. I mean, you are only 12 years old. What do I expect? One of the reasons why I am not brainwashed is access to the internet. But the internet can be dangerous if it's not secured. So let me introduce you to the sponsor of today's videos, which is Atlas VPN. What is Atlas VPN? Well, basically, this is a service which allows you to get a safe and secure connection with the internet. I personally used VPN many times and I wish I knew about Atlas VPN before. I was using VPN when I was getting to the US as an exchange student and I needed to enter the website of my college. And you know what? They were blocked in Russia. I just needed to use VPN and I've paid tons of money for VPN. If I would know about Atlas VPN, it would change a lot because with Atlas VPN, you can get a 3-year plan for $1.7 a month with an 85% discount, which is this crazy deal. Let's say you're in a proud American using Netflix and want to watch Friends. If you are in the US, it is just not popping up if you just Google Friends. With Atlas VPN for Netflix, you can become a proud Englishman, drinking a huge cup of tea, eating fish and chips, and watching Netflix and Friends. You can use Atlas VPN with unlimited data and as many devices as you need on macOS, iOS, Windows, or Android. So enjoy secure file sharing, malware protection, and unblocking any website which is not available in your country, and many other features with Atlas VPN. And grab your deal with the 85% discount on the website of Atlas VPN with my personal link in the description below. Thank you Atlas VPN for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to the video why I'm not brainwashed as most of Russians. I remember something from my school. I remember that in every single class, in every single cabinet of our school, we got the portrait of Putin. We got the flag, the Russian, as we say, gerb, and the portrait of Putin himself watching you as a big brother. And at that point, I didn't even paid attention to the portrait of Putin and why it is everywhere. Like, I didn't know about the existence of the term cult, personal cult, and etc. It was always funny to see Putin among great generals of Russian history as Suvorov or Ushakov, for example, and there is a list of generals and Putin in the middle. It was always quite fascinating for me to understand, like, even to imagine that that guy who is leading the country right now is alignable. We can align him to the generals from like Russian Empire history or something. But right now, I just understand that Putin always wanted to see himself among the greatest leaders of Russia, among the greatest generals, as we say, polkovodцы of Russia. So didn't really work out. I remember that every single year since the fourth grade, we got it was something like the festival and competition at the same time among classes in our school. And it was about marching in the military way and singing a song which relates to the military topic. We were made to wear those military hats. Thanks God we were not, handled AKs to march with them, but I still remember that we were made to march all the time and kind of, they were trying to, with this, to bring up us as some kind of in the military way, so we would be okay with Martian and everything. And I think Martian is always kind of related to the military. So I also remember when I was in sixth grade, we got some event which related to the veterans of the Afghanistan war, as far as I remember, and they've made us sing in a song about, like, how Russian army is brave and everything, holding literally AKs and wearing those shorts, uh, in like military way. We call them tельняшка. So my family once again was really supportive for Putin all the time. Before my mother actually got married with my stepfather, and kind of stepfather and his family from his side, they affected me in some way. I remember first time I ever heard somebody criticize, the leader of Russia, Putin himself. It was the relatives of my stepfather. It was a dinner with the relatives from my mother's side and the relatives from my stepfather's side. And they were discussing a lot of things. And of course, at some point it comes to the politics. First time I've heard somebody criticize Putin, it was that evening when I was, I believe, about 13 or 12 years old. Relatives from my stepfather's side were, as we say in Russia, intelligentsia. Intelligentsia are those who are the most educated, the smartest, the most intelligent Russians, usually who work in universities and schools or somewhere with their brain. So those are the people who are basically the most educated. And they were the first people to ever criticize Putin in the year of, I believe, 2012 or 2013, something about this. And it was the first time I've ever heard from anyone who criticized Putin. And it really affected my way how I, looked at Putin's figure and the whole politics in Russia. Well, of course, I was still young and I didn't know much about politics, but still I got some opinion on this because your family got this. And I was trying to copy this. But then I've seen, look, there is another side of a family which thinks a little bit more critical. They were not saying that, Putin is a murderer or Putin is a war criminal, especially after 2008 when there was a war with Georgia. No, they were just saying that not not everything is so clearly great with Putin. So they were the first people who kind of, planted that seed of asking everything at my mind. The next episode, which I clearly remember from my childhood, is 2014, Russia annexed Crimea. It was a whole national celebration. I remember everyone was saying, yeah, finally Ukraine, like, oh my gosh, I was saying Ukraine, yeah, that's what Putin would like. Finally, Crimea is back home. I remember everyone was saying this, and of course, I was one of them because I just watched TV. I watched a lot of TV those days, and every single TV channel, especially in the news, they were all the time saying, yeah, how great that Crimea is back home and everything. And I remember even my parents, who used to not really comment a lot on politics, they were also saying, yeah, like, yeah, finally, finally. We were discussing this at the breakfast in the morning, at the dinner, and it was kind of crazy. And I remember at one point, oh my gosh, it's such a shameful part of my childhood. I remember at one point I came to school, to study, and I remember there was a teacher of English, and she was like, the head of our class. So basically, she was like, responsible for me, for my grades at every single class. And I remember I talked to her and I said, like, it is so great that Crimea is finally back home. Like, we should celebrate it somehow. Let's make a rally. Let's make a, as we say, a meeting, somewhere on the streets to support our president, to support Russia. Let's celebrate it. And I remember she was not really happy about, me. I guess because she knew English, she could read independent resources and everything, and she was just more doubtful than most of Russians. And she was like not really happy, and she said, "Well, Zach, I will let you to grow up, and maybe then you will understand it better." And yeah, I did. Thank you. So yeah, imagine in 2014, I was like, "Yeah, finally Crimea back home," and right now I'm 21, fleeing Russia somewhere in Georgia, uh, making videos supporting Ukraine and just saying stuff against Putin. My life changed a lot. Yeah, I remember I always wanted to move to Moscow since the age of like 12 or 11. I remember I watched a lot of YouTube and all of those cool YouTubers. They were all living in Moscow and St. Petersburg, and all of the like rappers. I used to listen to a lot of Russian rap when I was a kid, and I was like, yeah, all those rappers, they sing about Moscow, how life is cool in Moscow. And I'm thinking, yeah, once I grow up, like once I'm 18 years old, I will definitely go to Moscow to study. When I turned 15 years old, I've started to prepare for YEGA, or what we call state exam for high schoolers. And basically, if you pass it well, you can make it to the best universities in Russia for free. And it was my initial plan, just to prepare for those exams as hard as possible. At the same time, relatives from my stepfather's side, they've got a kid. He was really smart. He was, I believe, 3 years older than me. He passed his Russian, so like state exam really well, and he made it to Higher School of Economics for free. And I was really jealous all the time because I remember we could come to Khabarovsk for the family dinner. And at one point, they would say like, "Oh, Danya," like his name was Danya. Danya is so smart. Danya is so intelligent. He made it himself. He prepared himself, passed his exams, and finally he's studying law in the higher school of economics in the center of Moscow in the best school. At the same time, at the dinner table, there is small Zach who was like, "Hey, I'm also here. Can you please pay a little bit attention to myself?" And they were, "Oh yeah, Zach, you are well, what are you? You're like 15 years old, got no achievements, nothing at all in your life." At that time, I was actually doing sports, and they were like, "Oh, Zach, you are so sportish. You are gonna be like the top player of basketball in Russia," because I was basically playing basketball for Birobidzhan team. Birobidzhan is the capital of Jewish autonomous region. I used to live there. So you see the difference. They were saying, "Yeah, Danny is smart, and Zach, you're just a sportish guy. It is okay, but of course they didn't criticize me, but that made me to feel really bad. I was like, why he could do that and everyone is so happy with him, and why cannot I do that? So that's the reason why I've started to prepare for my state exams so hard. I've literally started to spend every single day, every single weekend to prepare myself for the exams. But I was thinking, okay, whom I want to grow up, what career I want to choose, and I didn't know. So I just decided, okay, here is Dania. He choosing law, so I will choose law also because I want to beat him on his battlefield. So that's the reason why I've started to learn a lot of history, a lot of English, and a lot of обществознание, as we say in Russian. This is the subject which translates as общество as society, and знание is knowledge. So knowledge of the society, the combination of politics, philosophy, sociology, a lot of like things are combined in one subject. And once I started to prepare for my exams, I started to read a lot of just student books from our high school. So I just started to learn a lot of history. And already at that point, I started to kind of question myself on many things. Like just puzzle didn't stick. Like from one side, it was a puzzle that I've read in the student books in my school, and from another part, it was the reality and what people say in Russia about those events, what our politicians say about those events, or even the fact that they don't even say something about those events. So, for example, Putin always used to say that Crimea used to be like Russian territory from a very beginning, like the earth just started to exist and Crimea was already Russian. Just learning this in the 10th grade, I've just figured out no. In 1783, Catherine II annexed Crimea from the Crimean Khanate. This is like like another country basically. So it was not always Russian. It was annexed in 1783. And at that point, I started to question a lot of such things which Russia always provide as, like, territories which were always Russian. Of course, I started to read about the Soviet agreement with Nazi Germany to split Poland into parts. And actually, I don't remember they were mentioning this in student books. That but I remember I've read it somewhere in the library. Also, like the war with Finland before the Second World War, it made me questioning, like, if we are such a great nation, if we are such a liberators of every single country in the world, why do we invade other countries? Why? And the reality doesn't didn't have the answer to my questions. So many Russians, they don't have those questions, and they just don't understand how Russia became so big just by itself, I guess, as they think, not by invading, killing other people. So after history, I started to learn a lot of обществознание, which is the study of the society, as I mentioned. Общество as society, and знание as knowledge, the knowledge of society, the combination of politics, of philosophy, of sociology, and other humanitarian studies about the society. And at that point, I was also studying the theory of the government and the theory of law, from where it comes, why there is law, just why it controls us and everything. At one point, I've just read in a student book, one more time, in a student book, a Russian student book, which was just given me in my high school's library. And it was saying that the president should not take in more than two terms in a row, and just not being a president, not being a leader of a state for longer than 10 years. And I was like, well, it was quite frankly sad that it is how it should be. And then once again, I started to compare the theory to the reality. And I just looked at Putin and I was like, damn, who was the president when I was born in 2001? Vladimir Putin, who is still a president, Vladimir Putin. And it already made me thinking that, Russia is not a democratic state. Something is wrong with, the government of Russia. It was really strange that I was the only one person among my friends, classmates, who had the same questions. I was kind of alone trying to answer those questions myself, and questioning my parents, my relatives about some of them. Usually they didn't have an answer for me, or they were saying something that were saying something against the theory I had from my student books. So they were literally saying something against it, which didn't really align. The authority of a student book was higher for me than the opinion of my relatives, for example. At some point, I even remember when I started to argue a lot with my relatives, with my mom, with my stepdad, and I was always trying to prove them that they are wrong, being based on being based being based on student books from my high school. After that period, and it was when I was about 16, 17 years old, I've started to learn a lot about politics, a lot about Russian history and world history in general. I have started to use more internet, not for gaming or social medias, but for literally looking for information, looking for some lectures on history, or on the theory of law. So since those years, since the age of 17, 16, I've started to be interested into politics. I've started to learn a lot about it on the internet, because of course the student books and the teachers won't say you many things. And I've started to find a lot of oppositioners on the YouTube. And I just started to realize that oppositionary figures are real people who had the same question as I at some point. I started to look for the answers. So they've just started to realize that we are living not in a democracy, we are living in an authoritarian regime. We used to live there. It is getting close more to dictatorship, but it's another topic. Of course, I found Navalny, like revealing corruption videos. I started Ilya Yashin, who is a big oppositionary in Russia. I found the figure that existed up to 2015, Boris Nemtsov, who was then killed right by the Kremlin walls. It was a disaster for me to understand that he was one of the best oppositionary figures in Russia and he was just killed. And, we all understand by whom. A lot of the things which I heard in the videos of Navalny or Ilya Yashin or others, they were answering those questions that I had not been answered in my school from my knowledge of history and law. So they answered those questions, and the answer was that our government is corrupt, that Putin is want to be a dictatorship, and he wants the Soviet Union back. And that's basically answered most of the questions I had myself. So let's sum up what affected my views on politics and what affected on me not being brainwashed as most of Russians nowadays. Well, firstly, it is family. It is a really important factor, and of course, it is pretty personal. Not every single Russian could be affected by this factor. And my stepdad and his part of his family, they were all the time not oppositionally minded, but they were questioning everything, and it is a really great trait, I think. Just question everything you hear, just question everything you see. Even though my stepdad, he was not like oppositioner himself, he actually, I don't even know his position on the war because for me it is unclear. He kind of taught me, like before my mother met him, I was thinking, okay, my destiny, my life is just to stay in Komsomolsk in my hometown for my whole life, work a shitty job at Zavod, at the factory, making like 500 or $400 per month, drinking vodka, beating my wife, as most of the Russian men over there do that, and that's gonna be it. But then my stepfather, he was an example for me that you can actually work with your brain. You can read books, you can learn different knowledge, and with this you can actually make money. This is what was one of the biggest motivation for me to to learn more, so in the future, like when I graduate my school, I would actually will make more money than most of my friends and classmates. It was really important for me to see this example, to see that some people can make money not working with their hands all the time, but working with the brain. The second thing that affected my views on politics, I believe this is just self-education in high school, and one teacher which I had when I was 16, the teacher of общество знания, and she was really interested and interesting, and she made me being interested into the subject. So I'm really grateful for her, I guess. And just for my self will, I guess, to study myself, because I was just learning a lot of history and law because I was just interested in this. And of course, thank you the free access to the internet, and that I was able to open the websites which I wasn't able to do without a VPN, getting access to the materials, to the websites which are blocked in your country is really important. It can be life-changing for you. So make sure to check Atlas VPN, and thank you so much for sponsoring this video. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to press the like and subscribe buttons, and just type your questions, comments if you have any. And I hope the war ends soon and Putin dies, as I always say. So yeah, thank you so much. See ya.